Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session by Manage Engine. The session topic for today is credential management best practices for business process automation, where we'll discuss the importance of privileged credential security for process automation workflows. I would also like to take a moment and introduce our session presenter, Ganesh. Ganesh is an IT security solutions expert and has over 13 years of cybersecurity experience. He has been with Manage Engine for the last 10 years. Before I hand over the session to Ganesh, I would like to let you know that we will have time for Q&A towards the end of the session. Ganesh will answer your queries once the presentation is over. Meanwhile, you can drop your questions using the Q&A option available in the control panel. So without further ado, let us start. Ganesh, the stage is yours. Please take it off. Thank you.
Thanks, Anusha. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen so everyone will be able to see the screen. Right. So today's topic is going to be about credentials management, but particularly focusing on how you can handle it in your business process automation area. But just to give you a quick introduction, our company name is Zoho Corporation. And we have 3 different divisions inside our company. Under the title Zoho, we build on-cloud SaaS solutions focusing on business collaboration and productivity tools. Under the title Manage Engine, we build software on-premise IT solutions focusing on particular areas of information technology. And under the title WebNMS, we build IoT management platforms and network monitoring solutions. So we have more than 18 years of expertise in IT management solutions, and we also have a global presence with over 190 plus countries where we do business and help enterprises tackle some of those IT challenges. With regards to our PAM solution, it's part of our IT security management suite. So we also have 90 plus point products focusing on various other areas like service management or endpoint management or advanced analytics. So we started building our PAM solution in year 2007. So we were a small company back then, and we actually needed a product for our own usage. We wanted a safe repository where we could store our credentials and securely share it between our team members, and also have auditing and reporting capabilities. So that's where our journey began. But over the years, we've started building more capabilities. We gathered a lot of feedback and invested a lot of time in research with regards to the capabilities that would be useful for enterprises looking for a PAM solution. So as you can see, our journey started in 2007. And just last year, we rolled out the advanced analytics and anomaly detection capabilities in our PAM suite. So this is just a glance of some of the modules that we have in our PAM suite. So there's shared account password management, which helps you in discovering your devices and helps you in rotating the passwords and keys periodically. There's privilege elevation and delegation management, where you can promote a user for a particular time with a particular set of permissions and automatically demote the user. And we have behavior analytics for getting anomaly detection based on the usage pattern of your users and how the product is being used on a fairly regular basis. You can trigger anomalies based on a risk assessment of it. We also have session management modules. And in today's session, we'll be particularly focusing on A2A password management because it's going to be part of business process automation, obviously. So in terms of functionalities, obviously there are so many modules and there are so many features that this particular solution offers. But in today's session, we're going to focus specifically on how you can eliminate credentials that are hard-coded in different places, and how you can automate a lot of those areas where the credentials are required for different purposes. So as you can see in the screen, these are some of the common places where you will typically have credentials hard-coded. So shell scripts, these are fairly common. Pretty much all enterprises use some form of shell scripting. So it could be PowerShell, or you can have some cron jobs running on a regular basis, or you probably might be using regular Windows batch files. But all of these scripts would require credentials at some point based on what operation it performs. So especially if it requires certain operations to be performed remotely by connecting to a different device, for example, it would definitely require some credentials. So the common method of handling it is to basically just hard code the credentials inside your script, and it opens up a couple of challenges. First, because of the fact that the credentials are hard coded in most cases in clear text, or maybe with some basic encoding, it becomes a security concern, because anybody with read permission would be able to just open the script file and see what the password is in clear text. And the second challenge is once you start using a solution, a PAM solution, you would have all these credentials consolidated and securely stored in them, and you would definitely be enforcing password policies to change these passwords periodically, like every 30 days or 45 days. And you will have a complex password rule set up so that when your PAM solution rotates the password, it will be in compliance to the policies you have specified and all of that. So when these passwords are rolled over, like every 30 days or 45 days, all of your scripts will no longer work, because someone have to manually go to these places and update the new password. So you need to think about how you are going to document these places, how you are going to audit these places, and also make sure someone manually updates the passwords in all of these places every time you change it using a PAM solution, or even by directly going to Active Directory, for example, if it's a service account. And the same problems and challenges are there even for other connectors and config files. So if you are using web servers, for example, they will have config files. If you're using SQL databases or any form of databases that require a remote connection, so you will have a connection string with a JDBC or a ODBC URL, and it requires credentials for it to be able to properly establish the JDBC connection, for example. So these are some of the places where you will have these passwords and credentials hard-coded. And then there is DevOps platforms like Chef, Ansible, Puppet, and Jenkins. These are tools that a lot of enterprises, especially these days, they use these tools to build automation scripts to automate a lot of monotonous tasks that are typically performed manually, like transferring bulk files from one location to another, or creating scripts that could do imaging. So if you have virtual machines that are often created and destroyed, you will have these automation scripts designed to help you with the imaging process of the virtual machines, for example. So there are so many use cases and scenarios when you would be using these DevOps platform tools. But in order for these automation scripts to work, you will have the usernames and passwords and credentials hard-coded in them in order for them to be able to successfully complete their tasks. So with our PAM solution, we have ways for you to eliminate these two concerns. One being a security concern where the passwords are actually hard-coded, and second, the management of all of these areas and how are we going to have the passwords updated, especially if you are going to go through PCI or ISO audits where they mandate and request for reports where you show proof of how frequently you are changing the password. So with our PAM solution, we have two API functionalities. First is RESTful API, and the second one is SSH-based CLI API. Now, both of these APIs allows you to basically perform a lot of operations of our PAM solution through a programmatic fashion. So the way you go about using our API is fairly straightforward. First, you register an API user inside our PAM solution, and you will be able to generate a unique authentication token for that PAM user, API user. And every time you trigger an API call, you will be sending this authentication token along with the request so that it gets authenticated in our PAM, and then the operation is allowed to be executed. So the first step is to actually register the API user and get an authentication token. And if you are using SSH-based API, then you would have a public-private key pair where every time you trigger the API, you would be sending the key file for the handshake and authentication to happen. And then, there's actually about 60 plus operations that are exposed via these APIs, but the most commonly used API is to retrieve password. As I said, all of the places where you have these credentials hard-coded, the best way to eliminate them is to basically just remove them and replace them with a secured API call. So in this example, as you can see, I have a simple curl command that is pointing to my PAM server where I have this PAM solution deployed. And I'm sending the details about like which device or which account I'm requesting for the password. And I will also be sending the authentication token along with the HTTPS request. And once the request reaches the PAM server, there's a series of authentication. So there's going to be a SSL certificate-based authentication. Then the authentication token that you sent along with the API request is matched. And then inside the product, we have fine-grained controls of which users or which APIs can actually access which set of information. So by default, your API will have absolutely no visibility. So you cannot retrieve any passwords for the first time. So after you create the user, you designate certain credentials for this API user so that these credentials can be programmatically retrieved. So after all of these layers of authentications and checks, if the API request is found to be valid, the PAM solution basically sends the password as a response through the same HTTPS over SSL secure connection. So, for example, if you are using PowerShell, inside your PowerShell script, instead of the actual password, you will be replacing a curl command, or you will be replacing it with the API call, where the password is going to be retrieved in real time and executed without being locally cached or locally stored in any other file. So the same concept applies even for our SSH API. Instead of a REST call, you would be triggering an SSH command that's pointing to our PAM server, and you are sending the private key for authentication, and you're using the command retrieve, which is basically to request for a password, and you send the device details or the account details for which you are trying to programmatically retrieve the password, and our PAM solution basically sends the response over the SSH protocol, which again is encrypted. So this screenshot is an example of how you could use our REST APIs through PowerShell. And in this example, instead of retrieving password, I've actually used the API to add a device into my PAM installation. So, so as you can see, when I run that API call, it's sending all the details. It's sending what device I'm trying to add, what is the account name I'm trying to add, and all of those details. And at the bottom, you can see the response says that the particular device that I'm trying to register inside the PAM is successfully added. So we have a lot of examples for some of these operations as PowerShell scripts. So we'll be happy to share those PowerShell scripts with you guys if you are interested in trying them out, or just to see how it works. So maybe perhaps you will be able to expand on it and integrate it within your own PAM installation. And we also have scripts with Python. So Python-based scripts are also there. So we'll be happy to share those with you. If you just reach our support team, they'll be happy to share those sample scripts with you so you can try using them and see how you can solve a lot of the business cases within your own IT infrastructure. And so this screenshot is from my Jenkins instance. So as you can see, we have, like I said, we have plugins for each of these DevOps platforms. So when you install the plugin in your Jenkins instance, so you will have this option where you can say manage credentials with Password Manager Pro or PAM 360 plugin. and you can tag the particular device and account. So inside your automation scripts, you no longer have to hard code the actual credential. Instead, you can just use that environmental variable. So in my case, I just use the variable passwd1. And anywhere, if I put the word passwd1, when the script runs, it's going to be replaced with the actual password that will be securely fetched from our PAM solution. So similarly, you can create variables for fetching other details like account name, password, notes information. Sometimes you will need the notes to be retrieved so that it can be tagged along, or description information. So all of these can be programmatically retrieved using our CI/CD platform integration and the respective plugin. Then we also have enterprises using RPA products, robotic process automation solutions like Automation Anywhere or HP Orchestrator. So these are solutions that help you in creating a complex workflow. So with the DevOps, usually it's used for just automating monotonous tasks. But with the RPA solutions, it goes even further, where you can have a logical response, and based on that response, you could trigger another set of chain events that will follow based on the response received from the initial operation. So it'll look like a Visio flowchart, for example, and at the top you have operation one. And when that operation runs, it is going to get a response of yes or no. And if the response is yes, that's going to trigger operation two, and that's going to go through a totally different path. But if the response is no, that's going to trigger a completely different set of operations. So from the UI perspective, it will look like a Visio flowchart, for example, but each of these boxes and each of the connectors will actually have a bot representing them. And the bot is designed to do a particular operation to create this huge skeleton of a UI with a beautifully constructed logic and operation behind it. So the challenge with using these RPA solutions is, again, credentials are required for some of these bots to perform some of these complex operations. So with our PAM solution, we have a bot created specifically for Automation Anywhere, for example. And so with our bot, you will be able to, again, register a variable and make sure that you use that variable in other bots that you have created for different operations. And so every time the bot runs, it will basically fetch the details out of our PAM solution and broker it to the other bots that are actually trying to perform that operation. So it helps you in eliminating the credentials inside your bots. Instead, it helps you in using variables that can be replaced in real time without any caching of the passwords or locally storing it in text files, or even encoded files are not really secure these days. So that's the idea behind our design, and this is something that will come in handy, especially if you're using any of the RPA solutions. And then there are enterprises using vulnerability scanners like Rapid7 or Qualys. So the tasks that these scanners perform is fairly straightforward. They connect to a lot of endpoints, and they log in and scan for any vulnerabilities. So it could be port level scanning or interface scanning. But the idea is that the scanner should have the permissions and the required credentials for it to be able to communicate and authenticate to your endpoints. So the same problem, where if you're using a PAM solution and if you are changing passwords periodically, these scanners will stop working because whatever credentials they are holding becomes obsolete every time the password gets changed inside our PAM solution, through our PAM solution, basically. So what we have done is we have directly integrated our PAM solution with this vulnerability scanner, specifically Rapid7. We're also working with Qualys and a couple of other vendors. We're hoping to get those scanners also added into this list. But the idea is every time you change passwords using our PAM solution, we're going to broker the credentials to your scanner. We will actually log into your scanner's database and update the credential inside of it so that it never stops working. So this is a screenshot of my instance where you can see that I have basically imported all the services that are present in the inside PM scanner. So you can see that the scanner is configured to scan IBM machines, MySQL Server, Oracle databases, Microsoft SQL databases. So in order for it to actually get to these endpoints areas and to scan, the scanner requires credentials. And so you can see the associate account button where you are basically associating an account stored inside our PAM solution for that particular service. So once you associate it, the problem is completely solved. The problem of updating passwords inside your scanner is completely solved, because every time we change a password, immediately we take the new password and update it inside your scanner. So it never fails to run. It never stops working because of the lack of credentials or because of it having a wrong password. So that's the idea behind the vulnerability scanner integration. And like I said, we have plans to extend the list of scanners we support, a list of RPA solutions that we support as the market evolves, as vendors come out as leaders, and a lot of our customers start using these solutions. We will be adding more and more of these vendors and their applications with our PAM. And obviously, we have integration with our own Manage Engine products, like, for example, AD Manager or AD Self-Service Plus. These are products that are designed to basically manage your Active Directory, security policies, group policies, or local policies, or to do self-service password reset in case if your users forget their password or if they get locked out. But in order for them to do their operations and tasks, they will have a credential with them, maybe a domain account or domain admin account or a admin privileged service account specifically designed for those products. So you've stored that credential and the application is working fine. But then after 30 days, you have changed the password of that account using our PAM solution. So when you do that, the new password will be automatically updated inside those Active Directory management solutions so that they never stop working. And we will obviously be extending this list as well. We're planning to integrate our PAM to do this credential brokering for pretty much all Manage Engine products in due course. But yeah, so that's the idea behind the integration, particularly within our Manage Engine solutions. And so in this screen, you can just see a high-level architecture of what we currently have. So we've got integration with Analytics Plus, which is another Manage Engine product. It has its own deep learning and machine learning engine. So all the raw audits of our PAM are going to be forwarded to Analytics Plus, which then process that information. So it takes a series of data points like the IP address from which an operation was performed, the date and time, the user who did the operation, the target system for which a particular operation was performed, and many, many other data points, basically. All these are processed, and based on those data points, a risk assessment is done with a risk score being derived for each of those audits and operations. So if the risk score goes beyond a desirable threshold, for example, 85%, then the tool will automatically send out an anomaly stating that something is unusual and an administrator should probably check it out. So in due course of usage, like for example, your users are working and using the PAM solution typically from 9 to 5 business hours. But suddenly someday someone tries to log into the PAM at the middle of the night, perhaps over a weekend, and they're trying to check out some password or they're trying to log in to a machine remotely through our PAM. So the tool will know that it's a risky behavior and this is not a usual pattern, and it will automatically send out an alert stating that there seems to be some kind of an anomaly, and it will alert your operations management system or a SIM solution and further get that particular anomaly identified. Whether it's a real anomaly or whether it's a false positive could be decided by the users who are actually going to check it out. And then we have SIM integration, where we send all the raw audits of our PAM to your own SIM solution so that it can be further processed and further filtered, and you can trigger any other operation beyond that. In DevOps platforms, as we discussed, it's going to be useful, especially for a business process automation perspective. And then we have ITSM integration where you can authenticate any privileged access against a ticket ID. So if someone wants to go to a critical server or someone is trying to check out a root password of a critical Linux system, so we will prompt them for the ticket number and we will then check it against your own ITSM solution. So you could be using Manage Engine's own Service Desk Plus or ServiceNow or Jira or Zendesk, for example. But the idea is to have your stakeholders and deciding authorities not having to jump between multiple apps. So everything related to request, approval, all of this can be just done inside your ITSM solution. So from our PAM solutions perspective, all we're asking for is the user to provide us the ticket ID or the change request ID. So we then check it against your ITSM solution, make sure the ticket is open, it's valid, it's assigned to the right person, it's approved, and any other criteria you ask us to consider. So we will check all of these criteria, make sure the ticket is good to go, and only then we grant privileged access to that particular user. That's the idea behind ITSM integration. And AAPM is the module where you can use our APIs to eliminate the hard-coded credentials that we just discussed earlier. So there's a session management engine where you can launch remote sessions. Those sessions are recorded. You can basically hide the passwords and still allow users to remotely connect to target systems through RDP sessions or via SSH sessions. And you can shadow these sessions in real time. Make sure they are doing only this operations that they are allowed to do. So this would come in handy for vendors or contractors who are not actually working for your company, but they're probably in need of access just for a day or two. So you don't need to create Active Directory accounts for them. Instead, you just give them temp access to our PAM and just delegate device access without ever having to reveal any sensitive information or credential in clear text. And then we have SSH and SSL certificate management, where we allow you to manage the end-to-end life cycle of SSH keys and SSL certificate. So you can automatically rotate SSH keys, just like how we can change passwords. We can also update the keys in all of your Linux systems. And we can also help you in managing the entire life cycle of your SSL certificate. So starting from the creation of the certificate request, from getting it automatically signed, either using your own internal CA or third-party CAs like GoDaddy or Symantec or VeriSign or DigiCert. Regardless of any CA that you use, you can basically provide us that particular CA's credentials and you can automate it. So from within our PAM, you can order certificates without ever having to manually log into GoDaddy website or DigiCert website, for example. So the one area that we are currently missing, as you can see, is the IoT circle. It's kind of empty right now, but that's our plan. So this year, we will be focusing on IoT area as well. So we'll be expanding to support platform as a service or infrastructure as a service areas on how we can automate some of the areas where credentials are required, how we can broker credentials to those places. So these are the functionalities that we will be focusing this year and probably a good part of early next year. As the market evolves, we would also check the feasibility and see what would be beneficial for a large part of our customers. And the solution obviously uses dual layers of AES 256-bit encryption. And with regards to the editions that we have, so you probably might be a small business that you're just looking to start your PAM journey, for example. We have a standard edition for you, or you're a medium-sized enterprise and you already have a vault, but you're just looking for a way to change passwords, make sure your enterprise is in compliance, make sure you can generate reports for NERC or ISO audits. And then we have a separate edition for you that suits your PAM maturity. Or let's say you're a large enterprise or a large financial institution with different locations and office sites, then we have an enterprise edition for you that will suit your exact requirements. Or perhaps you're a service provider looking for a way to manage the endpoints and credentials of multiple clients. without mingling their data, without having them stored in a common area, to be able to compartmentalize each client's information as a separate shell. We have a separate edition for you, a service provider edition. And our licensing model is also fairly straightforward. We don't charge per user or the number of devices that you would like to manage. They are practically unlimited. So we only charge for administrative users. So these are people who will be setting up this tool and administering the tool in the long run. So they're like team leads for each and every team or each and every department that you have. And you only have to pay for these administrative users. And there's also an annual subscription model where you can just renew the license every year, or you can go for the perpetual model where you just purchase the product outright and the license never expires. And also from an architectural standpoint, we have high availability design, which is the default design. So when you purchase a single license, you can actually have multiple instances of PAM working in a replicated mode. So anything you do in one instance gets replicated to the other instance, and they both will work in a fully functional mode. So you can do write operations in both the instances because of this design. And if you're a large enterprise, then we have a multi-tenant architecture where you can go for an app scaling model. Say, for example, you can install 4 or 5 app servers, all pointing to a single SQL cluster. So the database level failover is taken care of by the SQL cluster, and we deal with the application side where if someone is trying to access and if server 1 is down, we automatically route them to server 2 or 3 or 4. So that you will always have the PAM instance running and the users will be able to access the systems. So that's pretty much what we have in terms of today's session. If you guys have any questions, like I said, you can just put the question in the Q&A panel. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay, so I'm going to answer one of the questions. Meanwhile, I will also answer it for other audience. So someone would like to know if there's any way to disable the functionality where we request the users to create an API for each host from where you are going to trigger the API call. So the answer is yes. So if you are sure that you're only going to be using it within your internal infrastructure, it's not something that has anything to do with external networks or cloud networks, then yes, we do have a setting with which you can disable this host check. So for example, if you have 5 servers, you can have one API user that can be allowed to access our PAM via API from all 5 servers. So I'll just answer the question, but so like I said, you can just drop an email. We'll be happy to answer you and send you the steps on how you can turn on the switch to allow multiple hosts for API. For high availability, our product comes bundled with its own Postgres database. So having a Microsoft SQL instance is optional. So unless you really need it, you don't need it. So the product comes with its own tailored version of Tomcat Web Server and PostgreSQL databases. So it will work in high availability mode even with the default database. So you take 2 servers, install this PAM on both the servers, and we have a particular set of steps with a command. So you run that command that's going to connect both these databases. And that's how our high availability works, where the replication happens at the database level and the front end completely works based on the data that's stored inside the database. So you can get the high availability even without Microsoft SQL, even without always on or a clustered setup. So you only need SQL and cluster or always on if you are looking for more than 2 installations. So if you feel like 2 instances failing over between each other is not sufficient because you have 4 offices, or maybe you have users accessing PAM from 3 different continents, for example. In such cases, it's a good idea to go for a SQL cluster as the backend, either a conventional cluster design, or you can use always on capability of Microsoft SQL to create 3 nodes, for example, and then point the PAM application to that. So To answer the question, the high availability feature is available even with the default database without having any Microsoft SQL backend.
Thank you, Ganesh. We'll keep the floor open for if anyone has more questions, we'll keep the floor open for 2 more minutes.
While we're waiting, I would also like to mention that all the capabilities of our PAM solution can actually be used in an agentless mode. So agents are not mandatory, so that makes it a lot easier to deploy the PAM solution and start using these capabilities right out of the box. So you only need agents if you are looking to manage a demilitarized zone, or let's say you have an isolated network with a handful of systems inside it. There's got a firewall in front. You're not interested in poking any hole in the firewall. In such cases, you could take these agents and drop them inside of that network, and it uses outbound traffic, and that way it pulls our PAM server and helps you in changing passwords and managing them. So the agents are completely optional and only needed when you are dealing with DMZ zone or isolated networks.
Okay. Looks like we don't have any more questions, so we'll be wrapping up the session now. We have received one more question, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you have 2 PAM servers and one backend MS SQL, will it work if one of the apps server goes down? Yes. So if you have 2 PAM servers and one MS SQL backend, the MS SQL backend, well, it'll work. It's not a good design. Like the idea behind high availability feature is that you have the application and database replicated. So you're going to have minimum of 2 copies of the application and the database. So if you just have one Microsoft SQL instance, and if you just point 2 apps to that same instance, it will work, but you have a single point of failure. What if your database crashes one day? You're out of PAM now. So although it'll work, our suggestion is either go for 2 Microsoft SQL instances and 2 apps that are pointing to the respective Microsoft SQL instances. So perhaps I can show you the diagram of the particular design, so you guys will get a better idea. But the answer is, like, it's recommended to have 2 instances. So if you 1 second, let me share the screen again. There you go. So this is the design. So you've got 2 apps and 2 backends. That is a good design. So if one fails, be it an application or the database, you've got another application and a database to take over automatically. And the next design is the application scaling design, where you feel like 2 is not enough, you want more than 2. At that point of time, you can go for this design. So this requires Microsoft SQL cluster. Typically, the cluster will have multiple nodes. Each node will be probably in different site or a different network. And SQL takes care of replicating the data. It could be synchronous or asynchronous, but it's the entire technology is basically Microsoft SQL. SQL takes care of replicating the data across those nodes. And we just have a form of application in front just to extend the scalability of the product. So let's say you have 15,000 users who are looking to use the PAM. Having the default database or just a couple of instances might not scale because of various bottlenecks. Like there's web server, that's database. There's only so much threshold your hardware specifications can handle. So in such cases, it's a good idea to have 4 applications all pointing to the single SQL cluster. And because of the fact that we don't charge per instance, you can have 4 instances with just a single license. Just point them, because from our perspective, even though it's 4 instances, they all point to the same data. So it's like, from a logical perspective, it's just a single installation that you are using, except that you have it as like 5 mirrors that can be used and extended for scalability purposes. All right, Saz. So we will send you this slide deck and also the recording of this session through email once it's ready. And if you guys have any more questions, you can always reply to our email and we'll be happy to help them out and answer those questions for you.
Yeah. So in case, like Ganesh said, if you have any more questions, I've shared our team's email ID in the Q&A panel. So you can always write to us at passwordmanagerpro-support@manageengine.com, and our team will be glad to assist you. So once again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Ganesh.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your time and listening to us. If you need any help, you can reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you out. You guys have a wonderful day.